Drunk at a company dinner, I accidentally called my boss hubby. My colleagues chuckled. Looks like she's absolutely desperate to land the boss. Adolph Scott, my boss, glared at me, his face cold. Can't even control your mouth? Why are you drinking? A brief stunned silence hung in the air. Then Archer Kingston, the notoriously hard-to-deal-with project CEO, let out a cold laugh from across the table. She was calling me. What are you getting so worked up about? I chased Adolph Scott from our college days straight into his company, taking on an assistant role just to be near him. Everyone knew I was head over heels for him. One day, as I went to deliver some documents, I overheard voices from inside his office teasing him. Aurora Jenkins? A girl from her family reducing herself to being your assistant? You actually let her? Adolph scoffed. She insisted on coming. What could I do? The others laughed. True, she's always been stuck to you. Hasn't changed in years. But Adolph, are you really not going to get serious with Rory? She literally dreams of being with you. Last time her family set her up on a blind date, you called us out for drinks late at night. I actually thought you cared about her then. The words had barely left his lips. Adolph suddenly got angry, his voice dropping, icy cold. She's just a nuisance. Why would I care? Outside the door, my hand, poised to knock, slowly dropped. I simply gripped the doorknob and pushed the door open. The people inside froze at my unexpected entrance, but only for a second. Soon they were all smiling again, acting like nothing happened. Rory, here to bring Adolph breakfast again? It was my daily breakfast delivery without fail. Adolph didn't even lift his head, as if he'd anticipated my every move. He merely tilted his chin vaguely in my direction. Just put it on the table. But I shook my head. I placed the documents and my resignation letter on his desk. Not breakfast. My resignation. For your review, Mr. Scott. Everyone stared, stunned. They practically swarmed the desk, craning their necks to read the words on the letter, then asked in disbelief. No way, Rory, are you serious? Adolph finally frowned and looked up. He stared at me. What's this all about? I pushed the resignation letter closer to him. I'm quitting. I also sent an electronic copy to your email. Don't forget to check it. Adolph glanced at the letter on the table, asking impatiently, is this because I made you work late yesterday? I shook my head. No. I just don't want to do this anymore. Adolph's face finally hardened, little by little. As I turned to leave, he called out to me. Rory, if you leave now, there'll be no coming back to me. It sounded like a threat, yet also a warning. I didn't look back. Couldn't be happier. The atmosphere in the room instantly dropped to freezing point. As I pushed the door open and left, I heard cautious, probing voices behind me. Adolph, she's just having a diva moment. Don't take it to heart. Yeah, you know how much she likes you, right? She'll probably regret it by this afternoon, and come begging to return. Adolph stared fixedly at the closed door, letting out a cold scoff. Like I care. I threw away all the useless things from my office. In the end, I found I had nothing left to take. Looking at the empty cubicle, I almost wanted to laugh. My mind drifted back to the anonymous video I'd received last night while working late at the office. In a private room, Adolph had his arm around a stunning beauty, listening indifferently to the chatter around him. Rory is still dutifully doing grunt work at Adolph's company, huh? You've got to admit, Adolph's got skills. That heiress hasn't shown up to any of our parties in ages. It was true. Chasing Adolph for years. A privileged heiress like me. I'd practically become his indentured servant. All he had to do was ask, and I'd willingly work late, attend his business dinners, until I was exhausted and sick. In the end, all I got was a jest from his friends. Looking at it this way, Rory really is like Adolph's most obedient dog. He stood by, swirling his drink, not denying it. He even scoffed. What are you talking about? She's just a dog by my side, not the most obedient one. The room erupted in laughter. In that moment, it felt like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over my head. So cold. But it was also like I'd instantly woken up. After a moment's thought, I quietly pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts to find the new guy my family had set me up with recently. I'd heard he was a genuinely wonderful person, But before, my mind was entirely consumed by Adolph, so I kept postponing the meeting and even thought about sabotaging it. Now, it seemed a little unethical, perhaps. But as everyone knows, the best way to get over an ex is to start something new. I tapped the screen. Want to meet tomorrow? To my surprise, he replied almost instantly. Sure, he was very gentlemanly. He offered to let me choose the time, and he'd arrange the location. But when my parents had mentioned the meeting before, I hadn't listened to a single word. So now I knew absolutely nothing about this man. Arriving early at our meeting spot, I hesitated outside the door. What if I didn't recognize him later? That would be so awkward. As I paced back and forth, I accidentally bumped into someone. I looked up. My gaze met a perfectly tailored, sharp suit. Above that, a face with astonishingly refined features. And the owner of that face was looking at me with a gentle expression. Why aren't you going in? His seemingly perfectly kissable thin lips moved as he spoke. I subconsciously swallowed, then quickly realized my lapse in composure. Because I knew this man. Archer Kingston. A well-known powerhouse in the industry. I'd seen his name countless times on Adolph's company's target partner list. But rumor had it he was ruthless, cold-hearted, and incredibly difficult to approach. Collaborations with him had never succeeded. I quickly stepped back, making way for him. Oh, so sorry. I'm waiting for someone. I was a bit distracted. My apologies. Please go ahead. But the man in front of me let out a soft laugh. Ms. Jenkins. I looked up, surprised. How did he know my last name? His eyes held a hint of a smile. Is there a chance the person you're waiting for is me? I was stunned. My family had only said they were setting me up with a truly great guy, but I never would have imagined it would be someone of Archer Kingston's caliber. It wasn't until I was sitting face to face with Archer in the private dining room he'd arranged that I kept my composure, smiling politely. Under the table, I was frantically texting my mom. You set me up with Archer Kingston? Is our family wealthy enough to marry into his now? Did you guys get rich behind my back? My mom instantly replied with question marks. What are you talking about, honey? Daydreaming already? We set you up with one of Archer Kingston's distant nephews? Your aunt probably didn't explain it clearly, did she? I glanced at the man across from me, who was smiling as he watched me. Surely there can't be two faces this handsome. As our eyes met, I couldn't pretend to be busy anymore. I stammered, are you Mr. Archer Kingston, right? He nodded, then offered an apologetic smile. Yes. My fault. I haven't introduced myself yet. It's a pleasure to meet you, Ms. Jenkins. I'm Archer Kingston, and I'm your date for today. A concise introduction, but it was completely different from the information my mom had given me. My mind was reeling. But my blind date wasn't supposed to be. Archer raised an eyebrow. He picked up the teacup on the table and took a light sip. That kid isn't good enough for you. So I came instead. He looked up at me. Is something wrong? Does Ms. Jenkins prefer him? I froze. The way he said that, it was like we were old friends. My heart began to pound. Archer, however, remained completely composed. His calm, deep eyes fixed on me, clearly expecting an answer. I forced myself to speak. Of course not. I don't even know him. He chuckled softly. Then it's okay for me to stand in for him, right? I swallowed. No, it's fine. Archer's question was simple, but the way he looked at me made my throat tighten. I nodded once. It's fine. His lips curved slightly, satisfied, and he finally picked up the menu. Good, he said. I already ordered. I blinked. You ordered before I arrived? You came 20 minutes early, he replied calmly. I arrived 30 minutes early. Why? Because I dislike waiting for important people. The words landed harder than they should have. Important people. For years around Adolph, I had been the convenient one. The person who waited. The person who adjusted. The person who chased after him while he barely spared me a glance. But sitting across from Archer Kingston, I suddenly realized something terrifying. This man had never once made me feel small. The dinner atmosphere was unexpectedly relaxed. Archer wasn't cold at all, unlike the rumors. He spoke little, but every sentence was measured and attentive. He remembered my preferences after hearing them once. When the waiter accidentally served sparkling water instead of warm tea, Archer quietly switched the glasses before I even noticed. And most dangerously, he looked at me seriously. Not indulgently. Not dismissively. Seriously. Halfway through dinner, my phone suddenly vibrated non-stop on the table. The caller ID flashed. Adolph Scott. Again. And again. And again. Archer glanced at the screen but said nothing. I pressed decline. Almost instantly another call came. Then messages. Where are you? Still throwing a tantrum? Come back tomorrow morning. Rory, enough is enough. My fingers paused over the screen. Then another message popped up. I saw your calendar. Blind date? For some reason that one irritated me most. As if he had the right to question me. I exited the chat directly and muted him. Across the table, Archer casually cut into his steak. Your boss seems clingy. I nearly choked on my water. That's not. He called 7 times in 6 minutes. You counted. I noticed things. He said it so naturally I didn't know how to respond. Then his gaze lifted to mine. Does he know you resigned? Yes. And? He thinks I'll go back. Archer gave a soft, amused laugh. He sounds very confident. I stared down at my plate for a moment before speaking quietly. I used to like him for a really long time. Used to. Not like. The difference made my chest feel strangely light. Archer listened without interrupting. I thought if I stayed beside him long enough, I continued, eventually he'd see me differently. And now, I let out a slow breath. Now I think he just enjoyed being loved. Silence settled between us. Not awkward. Just calm. Archer leaned back slightly, eyes fixed on me. That's his loss. My heartbeat stumbled. Before I could respond, the private room door suddenly opened. Everyone looked over instinctively. And froze. Adolph stood outside the room. His suit jacket hung over one arm, his expression terrifyingly dark. Behind him were several executives from his company, all looking stunned after clearly recognizing Archer Kingston sitting across from me. For a second nobody spoke. Then Adolph's eyes landed on me. Aurora, he said coldly, come here. The old me would have stood immediately, would have panicked, would have rushed to explain. But now, I simply frowned. Mr. Scott, I said politely, we're off the clock. The entire hallway went dead silent. One of the executives looked like he might faint on the spot. Adolph stared at me as if he couldn't believe what he'd heard. Then his gaze shifted slowly toward Archer. Only then did he seem to truly process the situation. Archer Kingston, the man his company had spent 3 years trying and failing to cooperate with, was sitting at the same dinner table as Aurora Jenkins, and judging by the untouched second dessert placed beside her, comfortably. Adolph's jaw tightened. You're having dinner with him? Archer finally spoke, calm and elegant. She's having dinner with me. The pressure in the room instantly changed. Adolph looked ugly for the first time since I'd known him. He stepped inside fully, eyes fixed on me. Rory, we need to talk. But before I could answer, Archer placed down his utensils softly. No, he said. It wasn't loud. But somehow, everyone stopped breathing. Archer looked up lazily, meeting Adolph's gaze directly. She already resigned. She's off work. And right now, his eyes flicked toward me briefly, she's on a date with me. The air froze solid. One of Adolph's executives silently backed out of the doorway like he wanted no involvement in whatever disaster was about to happen. Adolph laughed suddenly, short and cold. With you? His eyes returned to me. Aurora, are you doing this to make me jealous? I stared at him for several seconds. Then, genuinely confused, I asked, why would I need to do that? His expression cracked. For years, he'd been completely certain of one thing, that no matter what he did, I would always come back. But this time I didn't. And for the first time since meeting me, Adolph Scott finally looked afraid. Adolph's face darkened instantly. What? I picked up my phone calmly and glanced at the call log. You called me 7 times during dinner, I said. It's been 14 minutes since you started standing outside this room. The executives behind him all looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. because everyone there knew exactly what kind of person Adolph Scott was. Proud, arrogant, impossible to move. Yet now he'd been standing outside a private room for 14 entire minutes just to drag back the woman he claimed was just a nuisance. The irony was practically suffocating. Adolph stared at me, eyes sharp. "You're counting." I smiled faintly. "No. Mr. Kingston notices things." Beside me, Archer lowered his teacup slowly, clearly amused. That tiny movement made Adolph's expression turn even uglier. For the first time, I realized something almost funny. Adolph didn't actually like me. He liked owning my attention. The moment it shifted elsewhere, he couldn't stand it. His voice grew colder. "Aurora, stop being childish." That sentence used to work on me every single time. Whenever I got hurt. Whenever I got upset. Whenever I wanted more from him than scraps of attention. Childish. Too emotional. Too clingy. Eventually I'd become the one apologizing. But now, hearing it again only made me tired. I looked up at him quietly. "Mr. Scott," I said, "do you know what's childish?" His brows furrowed slightly. "Keeping someone around for years because you enjoy being admired." The room went silent. I continued before he could interrupt. "You knew I liked you. You accepted everything I did for you. You let your friends laugh at me. And even after all that, you still think I owe you something." Adolph's face finally changed. Not anger. Not arrogance. Something closer to panic. "Aurora." "No." I cut in softly. "You don't get to call me that right now." The executives practically stopped breathing. Because everyone knew. She was done. Completely done. And that was somehow more terrifying than a screaming argument. Adolph took a step forward instinctively. Archer suddenly stood. The movement wasn't dramatic. But the pressure in the room shifted immediately. Archer was taller than Adolph by a little. His expression calm and unreadable as he adjusted his cuffs lazily. "Mr. Scott," he said evenly, "you're disturbing my date." Simple. Polite. Humiliating. Adolph's eyes turned icy. "You think this concerns you?" Archer smiled slightly. "It does now." The tension became unbearable. One executive abruptly muttered something about another meeting, and dragged two others away immediately. Cowards. I almost laughed. Adolph ignored everyone else completely. His eyes stayed locked on me. "You're serious?" I tilted my head slightly. "About resigning? About leaving me?" The words slipped out before he could stop them. The entire hallway went dead quiet again. Even Archer's gaze shifted briefly toward him. Because there it was. Finally. Not leaving the company. Not being unreasonable. Leaving him. Adolph seemed to realize what he'd said a second too late. His jaw tightened hard. I looked at him for a long moment. And suddenly, all the feelings I'd carried for years felt strangely distant. The late nights waiting for his messages. The endless excuses. The tiny moments of kindness I'd treated like treasures. It all seemed embarrassing now. Not because I loved him, but because I'd loved someone who enjoyed watching me kneel for affection. I smiled lightly. "You were never mine to leave, Mr. Scott." His face went pale. Adolph stood there without speaking. For the first time in years, he looked completely unable to control the situation. And somehow, that frightened him more than anger ever could. I checked the time on my phone again. 18 minutes now. One of the remaining executives coughed violently and looked away. Adolph's expression hardened instantly. "Are you mocking me?" "No," I answered honestly. "I'm just surprised." "Surprised by what?" "That you're still here." The words hit harder than shouting ever would have. Because everyone knew what Adolph Scott was like. If someone annoyed him, he left. If someone upset him, he cut them off. He never chased. Never explained. Never stayed. Yet now he'd spent 18 straight minutes standing outside a private dining room while the woman he always treated as disposable sat inside with another man. And not just any man. Archer Kingston. The man who could crush Adolph's company with a single sentence if he felt like it. Adolph's voice lowered dangerously. "You think being with him changes anything?" Before I could respond, Archer casually slipped one hand into his pocket. "It changes quite a lot, actually." The calm confidence in his tone made the atmosphere tighten instantly. Adolph looked at him sharply. Archer met his gaze lazily. For example, he said, she smiles more tonight than she ever did around you. Silence. Pure silence. I froze. Even the staff outside the hallway stopped moving. Because that sentence, that stupidly simple sentence, was devastating. Adolph looked at me instinctively, and then he realized. I was smiling, not forcing it, not carefully watching his mood before speaking, not nervously trying to please him. I looked relaxed, comfortable, alive. A strange emotion finally flickered across Adolph's face. Regret. Real regret. Not because he suddenly loved me, but because something he thought would always belong to him was slipping away right in front of him. His voice became hoarse. Rory. The nickname sounded unfamiliar now, like it belonged to another lifetime. You really like him that quickly? I stared at him for a second before laughing softly. You still don't understand. His brows tightened. This isn't about him. It's about me finally deciding I deserve better. Adolph went completely still, and for the first time since I'd met him, he had absolutely nothing to say. The hallway clock ticked quietly. 21 minutes. 21 whole minutes of Adolph Scott standing outside a room he no longer had any right to enter. It would have been unbelievable to anyone who knew him. The man who never waited for anyone. The man who once left a business partner at a restaurant after 5 minutes because he hated wasting time. And now, he was wasting all of it on me. His eyes stayed fixed on my face like he was trying to find traces of the old Aurora. The girl who would soften the moment he called her name. The girl who would fold after a little attention. But she wasn't there anymore. Finally, Adolph spoke again, his voice lower this time. You're serious. Not a question. A realization. I leaned back in my chair slightly. I've been serious for a while. You just never noticed. That one landed hard. Because it was true. I hadn't fallen out of love tonight. Or yesterday. Love didn't die all at once. It wore away slowly. Every ignored message. Every humiliation disguised as a joke. Every time he let me stand alone while everyone laughed. Until eventually there was nothing left. Adolph swallowed once. Then suddenly laughed under his breath, bitter and disbelieving. So that's it. You chase me for years then suddenly stop? I looked at him calmly. No. His eyes lifted to mine. I finally got tired. The silence afterward felt suffocating. Because exhaustion was worse than hatred. Hatred still carried emotion. But exhaustion? That meant the feelings were already dead. Adolph clearly understood that too. For the first time since he arrived, a crack appeared completely in his composure. Aurora, he said quietly, I never told you to stay. I nodded once. I know. And I never promised you anything. I know that too. Then why are you acting like I betrayed you? I looked at him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. You didn't betray me. His expression tightened slightly. You just enjoyed being loved by someone you would never choose. The words struck with terrifying precision. Adolph's face went still, because that was exactly what he'd done. Kept me close, accepted my devotion, relied on my presence, while making sure I never expected more. It was cruel in the gentlest possible way. And those kinds of wounds lasted longest. Behind me, Archer suddenly spoke for the first time in several minutes. Mr. Scott. Adolph's gaze snapped toward him coldly. Archer's expression remained calm. If you continue standing here, he said evenly, people might misunderstand. Adolph laughed harshly. Misunderstand what? Archer's eyes flicked toward me briefly before returning to him. That you're the one unwilling to let go. The hit was fatal. Adolph's face finally lost all color. Adolph stood frozen in the doorway. For once, nobody rushed to smooth things over for him. Nobody laughed. Nobody spoke. Because everyone could see it now. The man who spent years acting untouchable had just realized the one person who loved him unconditionally was gone. And there was nothing he could do about it. His pride fought desperately to stay intact. You think this ends well for you? He asked coldly. Dating him out of spite? I almost pitied him then. Even now he still believed everything revolved around him. Archer rose smoothly from his seat and walked to my side. Not possessive. Not performative. Just steady. Aurora, he said calmly. Do you want to leave? Not commanding. Not deciding for me. Asking. That tiny difference shattered something completely inside me. For years, I'd begged for scraps of consideration from Adolph. And another man was giving it naturally without effort. I stood immediately. Yes. Adolph's expression changed instantly. Panic flashed across his face for real this time. Aurora. I paused. Not because I still loved him, but because after everything, I wanted him to understand exactly why he lost me. So I turned back one final time. You know what the saddest part is? His throat moved slightly. You never once thought I would leave. Silence. You were so sure I'd love you forever that you stopped treating me like a person. His face went pale. And now that I'm gone, I said softly, you suddenly care. Adolph looked like someone had punched the air from his lungs. I smiled faintly. But it's too late. Then I walked away. This time I didn't look back. 3 months later, Adolph Scott lost the Kingston project. Not because Archer targeted him. That would have been kinder. Archer simply never chose him. And once word spread that Kingston Group had privately rejected Scott Holdings after years of negotiations, competitors swarmed like sharks scenting blood. Several senior staff resigned. Investors pulled back. Projects stalled. For the first time in his career, Adolph experienced failure publicly. People whispered that he'd ruined his own chances over a woman. Ironically, that wasn't true. He lost because he underestimated someone until the day she stopped standing beside him. As for me, I stopped hearing updates about him eventually. Life became peaceful. Quiet dinners. Morning coffee. Late-night drives with Archer through the city while he pretended not to notice me secretly stealing fries off his plate. One rainy evening months later, Archer suddenly asked while driving, "Do you still love him?" The windshield blurred with rain. City lights stretched into gold outside the glass. I thought carefully before answering, then smiled. I think, I said softly. I was just in love with being needed. Archer glanced at me briefly. And now, I looked at his hand resting beside the gearshift and slowly slipped my fingers into his. Now I know what it feels like to be chosen. For the first time in a very long while, I was happy.